He never hit me, so I thought it was love. The way he needed to know where I was every hour. The way he questioned what I wore before I left the house. The way he sighed heavily when I made plans without consulting him first. I thought it meant he cared deeply. I didn't understand I was being trained, systematically, methodically, like an animal learning to perform on command. By the time I recognized it, by the time I could name what was happening, I was already performing, perfectly answering on the first ring every single time, texting my exact location without being asked, changing clothes before he could make a comment, canceling plans before he could voice disapproval, managing his emotions before he could express them. I had become exactly what he needed me to be, obedient without ever realizing I was obeying. It happened in the bathroom. I was putting on makeup, getting ready for work on a Wednesday morning, and he walked in without knocking. He never knocked on any door in our apartment, never asked permission to enter any space I occupied. He stood there behind me watching me in the mirror, and I realized something that made my hands start shaking. I was holding my breath, completely frozen, waiting to see if he'd approve of my outfit, my hair, my makeup, my existence. That's when I understood with perfect clarity. This wasn't love, this was training, and I had graduated with honors without knowing I'd enrolled. My name is Sarah, I'm 31 years old, and it took me 4 years to understand that love doesn't train you. Control does love doesn't condition you to perform manipulation. Does love doesn't require constant proof of obedience, abuse does. This isn't about obvious abuse. There were no bruises I could photograph, no screaming matches the neighbors could hear, no throwing things or breaking objects, or police calls in the middle of the night. This is about something far more insidious, far more difficult to prove. The kind of control that feels like devotion until you realize you've stopped existing outside of his approval. Until you understand you've become a trained performance of a person rather than an actual person. If this sounds familiar, if something just tightened in your chest, comment trained, just one word, that's all. Because what I'm about to explain in detail is the architecture of control disguised as love, the systematic methodology of turning a whole person into an obedient partner, and it's happening right now to someone reading this. Maybe it's you. I met him when I was 25 years old. He was 33, confident, financially established, successful. The kind of man who seemed to have his entire life figured out while I was still trying to find my footing. We met at a work conference, networking event. He wasn't flashy, wasn't trying too hard to impress anyone, wasn't performing for the room. He stood near the bar observing everyone quietly. And when I approached to order a drink, he said something I should have recognized immediately as the first lesson, the first test, the beginning of my training. You don't smile much at these things, do you? I was caught completely off guard, defensive. I smile. I just don't fake it for networking purposes. Good, he said, leaning slightly closer. Most people here are performing, playing a role, saying what they think they should say. You're real, authentic. I like that about you. It's rare. That's how control training starts, not with demands or restrictions or obvious red flags. With flattery so specific it makes you feel seen. Understood, special flattery that makes you feel valued for being exactly who you are right now. But only until he decides who you should become instead. We started dating 2 weeks later, exchanged numbers that night, texted constantly, met for coffee 3 days later, dinner the following weekend. And the first month felt like being truly seen for the first time in my entire life. He remembered everything I said. Every small detail I mentioned in passing, the coffee order I mentioned once, became what he brought me every morning. The book I said I wanted to read appeared on my doorstep. The song that reminded me of my childhood played in his car when he picked me up. He paid attention in a way no one ever had before, with an intensity that felt like love. I felt known, understood, valued, chosen. My friends were openly jealous. They'd pull me aside at dinners and whisper, "Your boyfriend is so attentive, so thoughtful." "Where did you find him?" My sister, who was perpetually single, said, "Don't mess this up." Guys like that don't come around often. Even my mother, who had never liked anyone I dated in my 20s, who'd found something wrong with every boyfriend I'd brought home, said, "Finally, you found someone who treats you right, someone who actually deserves you." Everyone could see what I had, a man who cared deeply, who paid obsessive attention, who wanted to be involved in every single part of my life, who made me feel like the center of his entire world. I felt incredibly lucky, chosen, special. The first training session happened so smoothly, so naturally, I didn't recognize it as training until much later. We'd been dating 6 weeks, still in that honeymoon phase where everything feels perfect. I was meeting friends for drinks after work on a Friday evening, casual thing, standing plans. I'd had for months, told him about it that morning over coffee. He said have fun, seemed completely fine with it, supportive even, encouraged me to enjoy myself. I went to work, finished my day, met my friends at the bar we always went to, had a good time, laughed, caught up, came home around 11. He was sitting on my couch when I walked in. I'd given him a key to my apartment the week before, seemed like the natural next step. He'd been staying over most nights anyway. He smiled warmly when I walked in. Genuine, happy to see me. How was it? Did you have fun? Good. Yeah, really good. We went to that new place downtown, the one with the rooftop bar, amazing view. He nodded, kept smiling, casual. Did you take any photos? A few, yeah, want to see them. Sure, I'd love to. I sat next to him, pulled out my phone, started scrolling through pictures of my friends laughing, the city lights behind us, our drinks, the sunset. He looked at each one carefully, attentively, then stopped at one specific photo, zoomed in slightly, the sky in the background. Who's he? That's Marcus, Jessica's boyfriend. I've told you about him before. They've been together like 2 years. Right, he said, and handed my phone back, went quiet for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then, "I'm glad you had fun tonight." "I really am. I was sitting here the whole time worrying about you though. Couldn't focus on anything, couldn't watch TV or read or work. Kept imagining all these scenarios. Something happening to you, you getting hurt, some guy bothering you or not taking no for an answer. I know it's completely irrational, but I can't help it. I care about you too much. The thought of anything happening to you makes me physically anxious." I should have seen it right then, the reframe, the subtle guilt insertion. The way he turned my completely normal night out with friends into his suffering, his anxiety, his pain that I had caused by existing outside his immediate supervision. But I didn't see it. I was too focused on feeling bad for making him worry, on managing his emotions. "I'm sorry. I didn't think about how you'd feel sitting here alone." "It's okay. It's not your fault. I'm probably being overprotective. I just maybe next time you could text me a bit more throughout the night. Let me know you're safe. That would really help with the anxiety, just so I know you're okay." "Of course, yeah, absolutely. I can do that. I should have thought of that." That was lesson 1. Establish clearly that my freedom, my independence, my existence outside his direct supervision causes him pain, suffering, anxiety. Make me responsible for managing his emotions, his mental state, his comfort level. Train me to voluntarily report my movements, my location, my activities, not because he demanded it, but because I wanted to ease his suffering that I was causing. I didn't notice in that moment that I had just agreed to surveillance disguised as care, to monitoring disguised as concern, to control disguised as love. The second training session happened 3 months later, escalated the established pattern. Built on the foundation he'd already laid, we'd been dating, steadily seeing each other almost every day, spending most nights together, becoming increasingly enmeshed. I got promoted at work, better title, meaningful raise, more responsibility. I was genuinely excited, had worked hard for this. Told him over dinner at his place. He congratulated me immediately, seemed genuinely happy for me, proud, even raised his glass, made a toast to my success. Then, after we'd celebrated for a few minutes, asked, casually, "Will you be working later hours now? Is that part of the promotion?" "Probably sometimes, yeah. It comes with the territory, more responsibility, bigger projects, occasional late nights. He nodded slowly, went quiet. That thing he did where silence became pressure, where absence of words created more tension than words could. Finally said after a long pause, "I'm really proud of you. I hope you know that. I just hope this doesn't change things between us, change what we have. I've seen it happen before. People get promotions and suddenly their relationships aren't important anymore. They're always at the office, always networking, always climbing, always too busy for the person who was there before the success. That won't happen with us," I said immediately, reflexively. "You're my priority. You'll always be my priority. I know you think that now, but I need to know you'll still make time for us. For me, for this relationship, I can't be in a relationship where I'm an afterthought, where I'm constantly competing with your career for your attention. I've been there before with someone else, and it destroyed me. I can't go through that again. You're not an afterthought. You will never be an afterthought, I promise." Good, because if I ever felt like I was losing you to your career, if I ever felt like your ambition was more important than what we have, I honestly don't know if I could handle that emotionally. I've been abandoned before by someone who chose success over love, who chose status over relationship, and I barely survived it. I can't go through that kind of pain again. You won't have to. I'll make sure we're okay. That was lesson 2. Make professional success feel like potential betrayal. Make ambition feel like abandonment. Make growth feel like threat. Train me to keep myself small, limited, manageable, so he feels secure, safe, unthreatened. Make me responsible not just for my own career, but for managing his insecurity about my career. I didn't notice in that moment that I had just agreed to limit my own growth, to cap my own potential, to manage his insecurity by making myself smaller. The 3rd training session was about appearance, about my body, about my presentation to the world. I was getting ready for an important client presentation, high-stakes meeting. Wanted to look professional and confident and competent. Incompetent, put on a blazer I'd recently purchased, fitted, well-tailored, sharp. Walked out of the bedroom to show him, "What do you think? Does this work for the meeting?" He looked up from his laptop where he was working at my kitchen table, studied me for a long moment, silent assessment. Then, "It's nice. It looks good on you." But I could hear the but in his tone. "No, but it's nice. You look great, really." His tone said something completely different. The way he said great sounded wrong, uncertain. "What is it? Just tell me. I'd rather know." That blazer is very fitted, very form-fitting, very attention-getting, and I know you're going to a client meeting professional setting. I just wonder if that's the impression you want to make, sexy versus professional. You know what I mean? There's a difference. I stood there feeling my confidence actively draining away. Feeling suddenly self-conscious, I thought I looked professional. I thought this was appropriate. You do. You absolutely do. I'm probably overthinking it, being overprotective again. I just know how men are, how they look at women in professional settings, how they make assumptions based on appearance. I don't want anyone disrespecting you, treating you like you're trying to be attractive instead of trying to be competent. I'm just trying to protect you from that. Maybe I should change into something else. Only if you want to. It's completely your choice, your decision. I'm just giving you my perspective as someone who cares about how people perceive you, how they treat you. I want them to take you seriously, to see your intelligence, not your body. I changed into something looser, less structured, more concealing, came back out. He smiled approvingly. That's better. That's more you. Professional, elegant, trustworthy. That's the impression you want to make. That was lesson 3. Make me doubt my own judgment about my own body. Make me dependent on his approval for basic decisions about my appearance. Train me to see myself through his eyes instead of my own. To value his assessment over my own instincts. To seek his permission for how I present myself to the world. I didn't notice in that moment that I had just agreed to let him curate my appearance, control my presentation, manage my body. Part 3 of this series is pinned in the comments below. It breaks down the isolation phase in detail. How he systematically separated me from everyone who could have me see what was happening. How he built walls so gradually I thought I was choosing solitude. Don't stop watching here. You need to see the full pattern, the complete architecture. The training accelerated over the following months. He started making small requests that sounded reasonable, caring, protective. Call me when you get to work so I know you arrived safely. Send me a photo of your lunch so I can see you re-eating properly and taking care of yourself. Let me know who you're re-meeting with so I don't worry about you networking with the wrong people or getting taken advantage of. Each individual request sounded reasonable when isolated. Sounded like care, like concern, like a partner who was invested in my well-being. But together they formed a pattern, a system, a training program. Each one trained me a little more to report, to check in, to seek approval, to make him the center of my decision-making process, to run everything through his filter before acting. He started correcting me in public, small things, gentle corrections that seemed helpful rather than critical. Actually, babe, I think it was Thursday, not Tuesday. Actually, I don't think that's quite what happened. Actually, you're misremembering that detail slightly. He'd say it kindly, patiently, like he was helping me be more accurate, more truthful, more correct. But what he was really doing was training me to doubt my own memory, my own perception, my own version of events, my own truth. He started managing my social interactions. After we'd see friends or family, he'd debrief me, analyze the interaction. Did you notice how your brother talked to me at dinner? The condescending tone. Like he thinks he's better than me because of his education? Did you hear what your friend said about my job? Kind of dismissive, don't you think? Did you see how that guy at the party kept looking at you? Made me really uncomfortable, felt disrespectful to our relationship. Slowly, interaction by interaction, he planted doubt, created friction, made me see people through his increasingly paranoid filter. I started making excuses to skip gatherings, started pulling away from anyone he seemed to have a problem with. It was easier than defending them or managing his feelings afterward. He started controlling the small daily choices, the mundane decisions that make up a life. What we eat for dinner, where we went on weekends, what we watched on television, how we spent our money, when we had sex, how we had sex. I'd suggest something and he'd find a reason it wouldn't work. Or he'd agree but make me feel guilty about it. Fine, we'll do what you want. We always do what you want. I just wanted to do something I'd enjoy for once. But okay, eventually I stopped suggesting anything at all. Just went along with whatever he decided. It was easier, less conflict, less guilt, less of that terrible heavy silence. He started rewriting our history, revising our shared reality. We'd have an argument about something specific, and later he'd tell me it didn't happen the way I remembered. I never said that. I would never say that to you. You're confused. You're stressed from work. You're not remembering clearly. Maybe you're conflating this with a different conversation. And because I was increasingly isolated and emotionally dependent and had no outside perspective to check against, I started believing him, started questioning my own sanity, my own memory, my own grip on reality. At that point, 6 months in, I still thought the relationship was salvageable. Still thought if I just communicated better, if I just loved him more perfectly, if I just stopped making mistakes, if I just learned to be what he needed, things would improve. We'd get back to that perfect first month. I didn't yet understand that the training was the relationship, that the control was the point, not a bug, that there was no perfect version. Waiting on the other side of my compliance, that realization came later in the bathroom mirror on a Wednesday morning, and when it came, everything I'd learned suddenly made terrible sense. By 6 months, I had been trained so thoroughly I didn't recognize myself anymore. I checked in constantly, multiple times throughout the day, texted my exact location without being asked, sent photos of who I was with and where I was and what I was doing, called when I arrived anywhere and again when I left. I dressed in clothes he had approved either explicitly or implicitly, kept my hair the way he preferred, wore makeup the way he liked. I canceled plans preemptively if he seemed even slightly uncomfortable with them, chose his comfort over my friendships consistently, prioritized his feelings over my relationships. I stopped voicing opinions that differed from his, stopped challenging him on anything, stopped suggesting alternatives to his ideas or plans. I had become perfectly obedient without ever being given a direct, explicit order. That's the genius of control training, the brilliance of the methodology. It never looks like control from inside. It looks like love, like care, like a partner who's deeply invested in you, who pays attention, who wants to be involved. By the time you realize you're being trained, you're already performing exactly as designed, exactly as required. The training had a specific goal, not just obedience for obedience's sake, but isolation, not just compliance, but dependence, complete dependence. He needed me to have no other source of validation, no other perspective on reality, no other option, no other relationships. He needed me to believe that he was the only person who truly cared about me, the only one who really understood me, the only safe place in an increasingly hostile world. He achieved this methodically, systematically. When I'd mention a friend casually in conversation, he'd subtly plant out, "She seems kind of flaky, doesn't she? Always canceling on you at the last minute." Always making excuses when I talk about my family, he'd point out their flaws, their failures, their ways of hurting me. "Your mom is pretty controlling if you think about it. Always telling you what to do. Your dad never really listens when you talk, does he? Always interrupting." When I talk about coworkers, he'd minimize my relationships with them, dismiss them as transactional. "They're not real friends, Sarah. They're just people you work with. They'd drop you in a second if you left that job or if it became inconvenient." Slowly, so slowly, I didn't notice it happening. Week by week, my world contracted, shrank, narrowed, until it was just him, just us, just the small, controlled space he'd constructed where I existed, only in relation to him, only as his partner, only as the trained version of myself he'd created. And in that isolated space, his training was complete, total. I performed perfectly, checked all his boxes, met all his needs, managed all his emotions, anticipated all his reactions. I had become exactly what he designed me to be. The training sessions became more frequent, more intense, more sophisticated. He started training me to anticipate his needs before he expressed them, to read his moods and adjust my behavior accordingly. If he seemed stressed, I knew to be quiet, supportive, undemanding. If he seemed happy, I knew to be energetic, enthusiastic, matching his energy. If he seemed distant, I knew to give him space, but not too much space, to be available, but not clingy. I became a constant student of his emotional states, always studying, always adjusting, always performing. He trained me to accept less and less, to be grateful for smaller and smaller gestures. In the beginning, he brought me coffee every morning, taking me to nice dinners, surprised me with thoughtful gifts, but gradually those gestures decreased, and when they did occur, I was so grateful, so effusive in my appreciation, because I'd been trained to see any positive gesture as evidence of his love, proof that he cared, that he was trying, that the relationship was working. He trained me to take responsibility for his emotions, his reactions, his behavior. If he was angry, it was because I'd done something to upset him. If he was distant, it was because I'd pushed him away somehow. If he was critical, it was because I'd done something worth criticizing. I became responsible not just for my own emotional state, but for managing his, for preventing his negative emotions, for causing his positive ones, an impossible task that left me constantly anxious, constantly vigilant, constantly performing. He trained me to doubt my own perception of reality. We'd have an experience together, and later he'd describe it completely differently, insist his version was correct. When I'd push back, he'd get that look, that patient, concerned look, like he was worried about my mental state. "Maybe you should talk to someone, Sarah. This memory thing is getting worse." Maybe it's stress, maybe it's something more serious. You're forgetting conversations, misremembering events. I'm getting worried about you. He trained me to accept his invasion of every boundary. He read my texts, my emails, my private messages, checked my phone regularly, went through my computer, monitored my social media, knew my passwords, had access to everything. And when I objected mildly, he'd frame it as transparency. Healthy relationships don't have secrets. If you have nothing to hide, why does it bother you? I want us to be completely open with each other. Don't you want that too? He trained me to prioritize his comfort over my safety, over my well-being, over my fundamental needs. I started skipping meals if he wasn't hungry. Started going to bed when he wanted to, even if I wasn't tired. Started canceling doctor's appointments if they conflicted with his plans. Started ignoring my own body signals, my own needs, my own instincts, because I'd been trained to believe that his needs always superseded mine, that a good partner sacrifices, compromises, adjusts. It was a Tuesday morning in late October, unseasonably cold. I was in the bathroom getting ready for work, putting on makeup, doing my routine, the same routine I'd done thousands of times, and he walked in without knocking. He never knocked on any door in our shared apartment, never asked permission to enter any space I was occupying. Privacy wasn't a concept that applied to me. He stood there directly behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence, his breath, and I realized something that made my hands start shaking so badly I had to put down my mascara. I was holding my breath completely, frozen mid-motion, waiting to see if he'd approve of my outfit, my hair, my face, my existence. I was entirely still, a statue waiting for judgment, for verdict, for permission to continue existing in the shape I'd chosen. And in that moment of absolute clarity, I understood. This wasn't love, this was training, this was conditioning, this was systematic control disguised as devotion, and I had graduated summa cum laude. I had become the perfect trained partner. I have been trained exactly like an animal, rewarded for compliance with affection and approval, punished for independence with withdrawal and criticism, conditioned over months and years to seek his approval for everything, to base my worth entirely on his assessment, to exist only in the shape he preferred, only in the role he had assigned. That recognition, standing there frozen in the bathroom mirror, was the beginning of my deprogramming, the start of my untraining. But it wasn't the end of the training itself, because he'd trained me so thoroughly, so completely, that even after I saw it clearly, even after I could name it accurately, I couldn't immediately stop performing the behaviors we're embedded to. Deeply automatic reflexive muscle memory. The process of untraining yourself is not like learning you were wrong about something small. It's like learning your entire reality was constructed by someone else. That every choice you thought you made was actually a response to conditioning. That the person you think you are is actually just the person he needed you to become. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing nothing was real, nothing was yours, nothing was chosen freely. I started small with my deprogramming, started with just noticing. I started paying attention to the training sessions as they happened in real time. When he asked where I was going, I'd noticed the automatic expectation of reporting, the reflex to explain and justify. When he commented on my appearance, I'd noticed the implicit approval seeking, the pause for his verdict. When he questioned my plans, I'd noticed the guilt insertion. The reframe of my autonomy as his suffering. Just noticing was the first step, seeing the mechanism clearly while it operated. I started testing small rebellions, tiny acts of defiance, wearing something he hadn't approved explicitly or implicitly, not texting my exact location once during an evening out, making a plan without asking permission first or checking if it conflicted with his unstated expectations. Each time I expected punishment, anticipated his reaction, and each time it came exactly as predicted, his mood would shift dramatically. He'd go quiet and withdrawn. He'd make a pointed comment. He'd withhold affection strategically, but now I could see it for what it was. The training in action, the conditioning attempting to correct my deviant behavior. operant conditioning in real time. I started gathering evidence systematically, not photos of bruises because I didn't have any, he never left visible marks, but screenshots of text conversations where he questioned my movements obsessively, recordings of conversations where he rewrote our shared history, journals documenting the training sessions with dates and times and specific examples. I was building a case not for anyone else, not for police or lawyers, but for myself, proving to myself that I wasn't crazy, that this was real, that the control was systematic and intentional, not accidental and loving. I started reaching back out carefully to people he'd systematically separated me from over months and years. Coffee with a friend I hadn't seen in 8 months, phone call with my sister I'd been dodging, email to a former colleague. Each reconnection reminded me there was a world outside the one he'd constructed. Each conversation gave me a different perspective. Each relationship offered proof that I existed beyond his, assessment of me that I had value independent of his valuation. I started seeing a therapist in complete secrecy, found one who specialized in coercive control and intimate partner abuse, paid cash so he wouldn't see the charges on our shared bank account. The therapist had specific terms for what I'd experienced, gave names to the patterns: intimate partner abuse, psychological abuse, coercive control, gaslighting. The training I'd endured had a literature, a research base, a diagnostic framework. I wasn't the first person this had happened to. I wasn't uniquely weak or stupid or damaged. I was responding normally to abnormal, systematic conditioning designed to break down my autonomy. I started planning my exit carefully, not emotionally or impulsively, but logistically, strategically. Calculated exactly what I'd need to leave safely, opened a bank account at a completely different bank he didn't know about, started saving money in small amounts he wouldn't notice missing, researched apartments I could afford alone on my salary, made detailed lists of what was mine versus his versus ours. I was planning like someone escaping not a bad relationship, but a cult, because that's what control training creates. A cult of two where he's the unquestioned leader and I'm the devoted follower. The training doesn't end when you recognize it intellectually. It follows you, haunts you. The conditioning runs deeper than conscious thought. I've been out for 18 months, and I still catch myself checking in reflexively when I am out with friends, still feel guilt when I make plans without telling anyone, still seek approval for decisions that are mine alone to make, still doubt my own memory when it conflicts with someone else's recollection. The conditioning runs deep, embedded in neural pathways, encoded in muscle memory, burned into automatic responses. That's the long-term damage of systematic control training. It doesn't just control you while you're actively in the relationship. It teaches you to control yourself after you leave. You become your own jailer, your own surveillance system. You internalize his voice, his standards, his monitoring, his judgment. You do to yourself what he trained you to do long after he's gone from your life. Deprogramming is ongoing, continuous, never fully complete. Every single day, I have to consciously choose to trust my own judgment, to believe my own memory, to validate my own feelings, to exist without seeking external approval. Some days it's relatively easy, some days I backslide completely, some days I catch myself mid-performance and have to consciously interrupt the trained behavior. Here's what I wish someone had told me at 25 when I met him at that conference. When he seemed so attentive, so caring, so invested, when everyone around me was jealous of what I'd found. Love doesn't train you love, doesn't condition you love, doesn't require you to perform constantly, to report continuously, to comply automatically, to shrink systematically. Love doesn't make you doubt yourself, question your memory, seek constant approval, abandon your friends, limit your growth, control your appearance. Control does that. Control disguised as devotion, as protection, as care, as investment. And if you're reading this right now and something is tightening in your chest, if you're mentally reviewing your own relationship against these patterns, if you're counting the ways you've been trained to perform, to comply, to shrink, Pay very close attention to that feeling, that physical response. You didn't fail at love. You succeeded at surviving systematic control. You're not weak for staying, you're conditioned. And conditioning is powerful, scientific, evidence-based, designed specifically to be invisible to the person being conditioned. The fact that you're recognizing it now means the training is breaking down, means you're starting to see the mechanism clearly, means deprogramming is possible. If you're performing in your relationship constantly, if you're checking in obsessively, if you're seeking approval for basic decisions, if you're managing someone else's emotions like they're your responsibility, if you're shrinking yourself systematically to make someone else comfortable, if you're doubting your own memory regularly, if you're isolated from other relationships, you're not in love, you're in training, you're being conditioned, you're being controlled. And training can be interrupted, stopped, reversed. It's not easy. The conditioning runs incredibly deep, becomes part of your operating system, but it's possible. I know because I did it. I'm still doing it every single day, choosing to deprogram, to unlearn, to reclaim my own judgment, my own memory, my own reality. My name is Sarah. I'm 31 years old. I spent 4 years being systematically trained to be the perfect compliant partner, and it's taken me 18 months to start untraining myself. The person I am now is still learning who she is without his conditioning, still practicing existing without performing, still rebuilding autonomy one small choice at a time. Tomorrow, I'll tell you about the isolation phase in complete detail, how he systematically separated me from everyone who could have helped me see the training clearly, how he built walls around me so gradually I thought I was choosing solitude, choosing to prioritize our relationship. That's when the control becomes total and inescapable. When you have no outside reference point, no one to reality check against, no perspective beyond his, that's when you become entirely his creation, entirely his trained performance.